So it's now my pleasure to introduce Gary Oliver of Accelerate, who will moderate a conversation between two entrepreneurs who had large recent exits and the importance of sales to their successes. Gary has over 30 years of experience building early, mid-stage, and global technology companies. He's currently the CEO of an organization called Accelerate. And Gary, you can introduce Sam and Shime. And thank you, Gary.
Here, and thanks for including me. As you said, today's topic is how to grow sales and revenue at each stage of a company's growth. I'm joined today by two founders who were not only able to accomplish this, but both had great exits, as you mentioned. Very impressive guys and perfect guests for this panel. First, I'd like to welcome Shyam Rao. Shyam is the co-founder and CEO of Punch, which was recently acquired for $500 million by PAR Technology Corporation, a leading global provider of restaurant technology. Punch delivers dynamic one-to-one customer engagement through data-driven, omni-channel loyalty offers, customer engagement for restaurants, consumer stores, and other retailers. Shyam, great to have you join us.
Thank you.
Also, please welcome Sam Nagar as VP of Corporate Strategy for Siemens Factory Automation Business Unit. Sam's responsible for executing the company's digitalization, vision, and evolution of the industrial shop floor. One of the original pioneers of edge computing at the age of 23, Sam founded and grew his edge computing startup Pixeom to over 25 million in annual revenue, over 100 employees, and 60 plus of the Fortune 500 enterprise customers. He assumed his current position following Pixeom's acquisition by Siemens after 6 years of growing the startup. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Gary.
All right, guys, so let's jump straight in here. What we're going to talk about today is sort of the evolution of your companies and startups, and what does it mean from a revenue and sales perspective in each one of those stages. And let's start with the early days, right? Right when you founded the company, you were working on your product, you were trying to get early product market fit. And as you know, a lot of times the founder's got to be the lead salesperson as well. And so would love to hear, how that went, what your experience was there. What is the role in your view of the CEO right from the founding in terms of trying to get early traction, product market fit, customer satisfaction, et cetera. So maybe Sam, why don't you go first?
Sure, thanks, Gary. So yeah, in the early days, especially when you don't have a sales team, I think for me, the biggest challenge was trying to strike a balance between kind of executing well with a smaller quantity of customers, or trying to cast my net wide to quite a few of them. We ended up actually landing a fairly large first customer account, which was Samsung at the time, which was quite a beast to take on as a first customer. That I think served as a good reference point for us, but it was certainly a risk on taking on one customer and deciding to execute well on that one before scaling out too much.
Yeah, those are exposure could be a two-way street, right? It could either put you on as a rocket ship, or it could hurt you. And I suspect your role as CEO, you were heavily involved in both from a product perspective, making sure the customer is happy, et cetera. How about once you landed those folks, right, and you made them happy and you started to go beyond that? What was your role in kind of the next set of maybe the first 5 customers beyond that?
Yeah, I ended up having to be the biggest evangelist for the product for us, and it also depends how you compose your team. But for us, we had mostly engineers, and as a CEO, you have to be a little bit of everything. So until we had more folks that could advocate and effectively sell the product, that was something that fell to me quite a bit.
Yeah, you were it. You were the lead sales guy as well as the founder.
Yep.
Yeah. Tom, how about you? Can you talk about your experience right when you were getting launched and trying to establish your first early customers and revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't have the good and bad situation Sam did with like a whale right off the bat. I think, very much we were sort of in category creation mode. Just to give you a reference, we essentially build solutions just like the Starbucks app. So integrated commerce, payments, loyalty, offers, et cetera, for consumers. very much ahead of the time when we started. And one thing we were very sort of focused on was we knew we wanted paying customers or revenue generating customers from day one, not so much for the revenue, but for validation. And so the first phase, I think, founders you're doing everything. You're building product, you're trying to, get people to adopt the tech, recruiting customers, essentially, just the way you're recruiting your team. In that phase, it was very much sort of trying to figure out, where the customers are, getting them to view a demo or buying into the vision, having them try it, and then using that as a launch pad for, either product development, accelerated product development, or ideas, and second, as reference customers for the next set. So
yeah, so the charging the client was less about revenue and more about validating that if they're willing to pay something, there's value there.
Yes.
How did that translate then to, the chase for revenue, right? From kind of validation that the product market fit to validate, and starting to build revenue and profitability?
Yeah. So I think, in our case, once we realized customers found value, I mean, someone writing a check or paying you is huge validation. I think Sam will agree with this, right? It means you're providing value at some level. Once we figured out that there is something here, it was more about figuring out, what type of market we wanted to go after. So in our case, we started off, there was a pivot. We started off selling to mom and pops, realized very quickly that wasn't a market we wanted to focus on, primarily because of the heavy lift it requires in terms of, servicing them, and, they have the same wants and needs as the largest of enterprises without the sort of pocketbook behind it. So we quickly pivoted to the sort of enterprise sector within retail. And there it was, larger checks, but I think Sam's point about Samsung holds here, which is, these larger companies will pay you, but you have one shot, and if you sort of screw it up, the reputational damage, et cetera, is really hard to recover from. So if you're playing in the big leagues, you need to sort of be ready for that.
I remember one of my startups, we landed a whale, and they said, look, we're either going to standardize our company on you or we're going to kick you out. And it was exactly what you said. And we were fortunate enough, after it took a year to get them, but it was, Sam, to your point, it was one of those deals where it can make the company or you could blow up. And luckily we were able to make it happen. So yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Some sleepless nights for sure with a small team, right? And you're trying to act like a big company as a small company. Okay. So now you've got to the point, you've got some early traction, you've got some early customers. Shyam, I think what you said also, it resonated from a perspective of what Conwell said in his keynote the other day about finding and pivoting to find that model that can be profitable at scale. And I think what you said around the mom and pops was, hey, they're paying us a little bit of money, but the cost and the complexity to service them is no different than a client who's going to pay bigger checks, right? And so you were able to figure that model out. So not only at a small level, but as you scaled up, it was a very profitable thing. So let's talk now about kind of, in the evolution of your companies, right? Now you get to a point where, all right, I've got some customers, right? I've gotten to that first step. I've gotten some good exposure, some good, references. And you get to that point to say, all right, now how does my role change, as I start to bring a team on? And one of the things I've seen is where a lot of companies get stuck is they want to go out and hire, the big VP of sales when the company's not quite mature enough to do it, right? And the VP of sales doesn't want to come in unless they can bring in their team and hire regional managers and the whole thing. And really what you want is this next person to come in and own the next 10 deals, right? Kind of like you did for the first 10 deals. Talk to me about how you managed through that process and how you approach it. And I realized that, the businesses are a little different, right? From an enterprise perspective. I think, you had channels and things of that nature, right? Which can play the role of a larger team. So Sam, why don't you go first and kind of talk about how you took that next step, from landing the first deals yourself to starting to move on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so when, we were thinking about, especially increasing our team and bringing more people on, something that was different for us was we weren't actually venture backed. So all of the revenue that was coming in for us, I had to make a decision, right? Do I invest in growing the sales? Do I invest in marketing? Do I invest in growing the engineering team? For me, just because of the nature of the product and the type of the people we were selling to, right? So this was kind of very infrastructure focused. The type of people that were using our products are, fellow engineers, right? And architects and things like that. So for me, I reinvested all of our money into just hiring more engineers and making sure the product was good enough that I could put it in the hands of another engineer and they'd fall in love with it, right? And so I actually, kind of speaking to your earlier question, I might have waited a little too long to bring in, a head of sales who could take ownership of that. For me, again, funding was a little bit more limited, but I'd say, part of the mitigation for that, like you alluded to, was finding the right channel partners who, whether it was, Google Cloud or Intel or, NVIDIA or some of these companies out there who, if their sales team was able to get a sale of my product, it equated to a sale of their product. So then you don't even have to worry about setting up the right, type of, compensation for them, right? Commission if they get a sale of my product, it's already built in. And that was, basically how I chose to scale. But by the time, we had started to hit, 10, 15, even 20 million in revenue, by that point, it was starting to feel like it was actually a little too late to bring somebody on board without a substantial ramp up time and, kind of being able to inflect it at the right, point in time, right? So that they could take over and continue that growth trajectory. So, luckily we still had a lot of channel partners we could still tap into, but I would actually say, on both sides, you have to balance, when it's too early and when it's too late to bring on a head of sales.
No, it's a really interesting point. So in your case, you found the right channel partners that had global reach. And for you, it was all about making sure you had the differentiated product that it could be used by those people that then they became your channel worldwide, which is a little different, right, than building a direct sales force and trying to do that sort of thing. And it sounds like you got to a point where it was, you called it too late, but you were probably so involved with that, it was be hard to unplug yourself out of that, right? Because you were the gearbox in the middle. Sham, how about you? When you got to that kind of phase of growth, what challenges or opportunities did you see?
Yeah, I think the key point isn't so much about finding the VP of sales. In my opinion, it's about figuring out where your buyers are. So in Sam's case, he found, I think his model is channel based, and he was able to figure out, that's a good model. In our case, it was very much direct selling, and we figured out in our vertical, at least pre-pandemic, buyers bought at trade shows. So we knew it was an external sales model, direct sales, and sort of physical in that respect from a demand gen perspective. And once we figured that out, it was about, hiring the team. I think it's important when you're hiring your first sort of squad of salespeople that they be somewhat entrepreneurial, especially if it's a new category, because, there aren't sales engineers. There aren't, there isn't a team of sort of product marketing, filling out robust RFPs, et cetera. So you need scrappy people. I think the title is less sort of, a factor. But at some point, once you hit, I would say 15, 20 million in sales, I think you need to pivot to a growth mindset, which is about scale. And there it's not about individuals and individual heroics. It's about team and, structure, right? And there you need very much the traditional CRO or VP of sales who can create an organization where, you're able to track at a high level, right, the funnel math, right? Right from sort of qualified leads down to sort of closed deals for a quarter.
I like what you said, which is before you go try to hit that scale, you got to figure out your business. Who's the buyer? Where do you get to them? All that. And if you bring that team in too early, you're just going to burn a lot of cash. You're going to frustrate people, and people that were very successful before they came to you are going to, not be so successful. Right.
Exactly.
Believe it or not, guys, we only have 5 minutes left. This is kind of flying by. So I'm going to jump to kind of combine two topics. Now you take the next step. It's just exactly what you said, Sean, which is, okay, now I figured it out. How do I go reach global markets, right? And one of the things we found, even with Accelerate, is that a lot of companies get to that point to say, okay, I have these 20 great customers. If I could only go get another 100, how do I get to that decision maker? How do I get to the decision maker, in organizations in Germany or Europe, right? I can't build out that whole organization. And what we found is that a lot of us around getting the right warm connections to the right decision makers that have that need. So can you talk to me about kind of how you took that next step? And then also how your role changed as founders and CEOs as you went through, right, from step to step to step. Your role at that scale stage was really different than that first set of trying to land your first customers or refine the technology. So maybe, Sean, why don't you continue on here, and then we'll let Sam close it out here.
Yeah, so let me address the second piece first. So I've, at least in the context of Punch, I think your role, so, someone, if you think about this, a graph, and, you want your company to be on a sort of slope, a very, high slope in terms of growth. As a CEO, you need to be at a steeper curve. You need to be ahead of the company. So when you start a company, it's all hands on deck. You're doing everything. You're a janitor. You're sort of coding. You're doing everything. As you scale, I think your role really becomes about organizing and creating the org that will grow. You will grow into. So you need to be sort of 6 to 1 month, year, or maybe even more ahead of where your org is today. That's just evolution of CEO, in my opinion.
And building out the leadership team and all that, right? So that you build depth and breadth. Yep.
Yeah, I'd say towards the end, fully 40-50% of my time was just recruiting, finding the right people. So the first part of your question was around, I'm sorry, Gary, if you could.
Around how do you get, as you start to expand, right? You want to really expand globally. How do you get to the right buyers and the right geographies with, in a way to cut down that sales cycle so you can move quickly?
Yeah. So our case is slightly unique. Sam, I'm sure, can offer more color here. In our scenario, my only refrain is you shouldn't go international if you're not ready for it. Our US-based customers were taking us with them internationally, very different. We sort of grew up to the very top of the enterprise sector in our verticals. And there it was a bunch of very, very strong reference customers that sort of connected us with others. We are live in 20 countries, but we did it again, by piggybacking on our US customers, taking us with them abroad.
And that's really smart.
Sam will have more color on that.
Yeah, Sam, why don't you wrap it up for us? We've got about a minute left, and
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I think it was a little easier for me because I had all the channel partnerships established. I didn't actually focus on any particular geography. I was getting referrals from some of these partners, a few every week, right, and all over in many different countries. So for me, it wasn't as much a concern, but I think one major consideration of actually doing our exit, right, of getting acquired by Siemens, which is a major, multinational corporation, that was certainly something that was taken into consideration, right? Because we didn't have our own sales team. We were leveraging the channel partners. We would typically only get referrals from them. So let's say if there was a specific wish customer that I wanted to get, if one of the channel partners wasn't already serving them, that wasn't a clear path for me on how to, go and obtain them. And then, plus we're also in a new market. Edge computing was, I'd say, is a lot less nascent now. It's much more evolved. But by being acquired, then it helped us to completely capture the market before any other startup could get in there too. So, that was a big part of the decision. Now I have, a giant sales force selling the product, worldwide. plus the channel partners we had. So that was, in my opinion, part of the decision-making process there. And then for the first part of your question, I think, Sham gave a very great answer on how the role evolved. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, Sam and Sham, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for participating. Congratulations on your success. And for those young entrepreneurs that would like to continue the dialogue, we're going to have around noon today, there's a table under networking called Growth Coaching. So if anybody would like to participate in that, Sam, Sham, I know you got to catch an airplane, but if you'd like to participate, we'd love to have you. And thanks again very much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary, Sam, and Sham. Really appreciate all that you've done. It was a great panel.